The last 3 ships of the Zephyrian fleet floated in the cold darkness of space like broken toys. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the stars through the cracked viewing window. His people were dying. The air was getting thinner with each passing hour, and the lights flickered as their power ran low dot behind him. His crew worked at their stations with quiet desperation. They had been running for 3 years now, jumping from star to star, trying to escape the things that hunted them. The Devourers, they called them. Ancient machines that ate entire worlds, turning planets into fuel for their endless hunger. Commander called out Zixani, his communications officer. Her voice was weak from breathing the stale air. The engines on the second ship have stopped working. They're asking for help. Veltar closed his eyes. They had no help to give. Their own ship was barely holding together. The third ship was even worse off, with half its crew already dead from radiation poisoning. Soon, all of them would join their ancestors in the Great Void. "Tell them to do what they can," he said softly. "We all must face the end with honor." The Zephyrians had once been proud. Their civilization had lasted for 10,000 years, spreading across dozens of star systems. They had built beautiful cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants, and underwater colonies in the deepest oceans. They had art and music and poetry that could make even the coldest heart weep with joy. Now they were down to less than 5,000 souls, crammed into 3 dying ships that the Devourers had come without warning. At first, they were just strange signals from the edge of Zephyrian space. Then entire star systems went dark. When the first scout ships went to investigate, they found nothing but empty space where planets used to be. The Devourers consumed everything, the worlds, the moons, even the stars themselves. The war that followed was not really a war at all. The Zephyrians fought bravely, but their weapons were useless against the ancient machines. Every battle was a retreat. Every retreat left more of their people dead. In the end, they had no choice but to run. "Sir," Zexani said again, her voice breaking, "the children in Section 7 are asking for their parents. But their parents are in the section that lost air pressure yesterday." Veltar felt his heart break a little more. The children were the future of their race. But what future was there now? In a few days, maybe a week, they would all be gone. The Zephyrians would become just another dead species, forgotten in the vastness of space. He looked at his crew again. They were good people, all of them. Zizani had been with him for 15 years. She had a mate and 2 children back on the homeworld when the Devourers came. Now she was one of the few survivors, and she worked every day to keep them alive just a little longer. Colvin, his science officer, was barely more than a child himself. He had just graduated from the academy when the evacuation began. He should have been starting his career, maybe finding a mate, raising a family. Instead, he spent his days trying to fix systems that were beyond repair. "Commander," Colvin said, not looking up from his instruments, "I have an idea. It's probably stupid, but ... "Tell me," Veltar said. At this point, even stupid ideas were better than no ideas. We could send out a distress signal, a really strong one, using all our remaining power. Maybe someone will hear it." Zexani laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Who would hear it? We're in the middle of nowhere. We've been scanning for other intelligent life for thousands of years and found nothing. We're alone out here." "Maybe," Colvin said, "but what if we're not? What if there are others out there, and they just haven't found us yet? What if they're looking for us the same way we've been looking for them?" Veltar thought about it. They had always assumed they were the only intelligent life in the galaxy. Their scientists had theories about other civilizations, but they had never found any proof. The galaxy was so big, and space was so empty. The Chances of two species finding each other seemed impossible. But what choice did they have? They were going to die anyway. "What kind of signal?" he asked. "A mathematical sequence," Colvin said, his voice getting stronger as he explained his idea. "Prime numbers, then basic physics constants, and a simple message. Help us. We are dying. If anyone out there is listening, if anyone out there cares, please help us. It will use up most of our remaining power," Zaxani warned. "We might not have enough left to keep life support running." "We're going to lose life support anyway," Veltar said. "At least this way we try." Far away, in a different part of the galaxy, Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat in a small room full of computers and screens. The room was buried deep underground in the mountains of Colorado, far from any city. It was part of a secret project called Lighthouse, where humans listened to space, hoping to hear something other than the random noise of stars and planets. Jake had been doing this job for 3 years, and he had never heard anything interesting. Just the endless hiss of cosmic radiation, the regular pulses of spinning stars, and the occasional radio burst from distant galaxies. Sometimes he wondered if he was wasting his life, sitting in this underground bunker, listening to nothing. He was drinking his 4th cup of coffee when the signal came through Dot at first. He thought it was just another glitch in the equipment. The computers were old, and they broke down all the time. But as he listened more carefully, he realized this was different. The signal was artificial. It had structure, patterns that couldn't be natural. Jake's hands started to shake as he recorded the signal and ran it through the analysis programs. The computers found prime numbers, then mathematical constants, then something that looked like a message. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. For the first time in human history, someone had heard a voice from the stars. And that voice was asking for help. Jake reached for his phone to call his supervisor, Colonel Lisa Martinez. As he dialed her number, he looked up at the ceiling of the underground bunker and thought about the vastness of space above him. Somewhere, out there, in the cold darkness between the stars, someone was dying. Someone was calling out, hoping that they weren't alone. And now, for the first time in the history of both species, they weren't alone anymore. Colonel Lisa Martinez arrived at the underground facility at 3 in the morning. She had driven through the dark mountain roads at dangerous speeds, her mind racing with the impossible news Jake Morrison had given her over the phone. An alien signal. Real aliens asking for help. Jake met her at the security door, his face pale with exhaustion and excitement. He had been working for 6 straight hours, running the signal through every test he could think of. Each test confirmed what he already knew, but could barely believe. "Show me," Lisa said simply. They walked through the quiet hallways to the main listening room. Jake sat down at his computer and played the recording. The signal was weak, crackling with static, but the patterns were clear. Prime numbers mathematical, constants, and then something that made Lisa's blood run cold. "The signal is getting weaker," Jake explained. "Each transmission is fainter than the last. Whatever is sending this is running out of power." Lisa listened to the recording 3 more times. She had spent 20 years in the military, rising through the ranks by making hard decisions under pressure. But nothing had prepared her for this. The first contact with alien life, and they were dying. "We need to call the president," she said finally. Within 2 hours, the most powerful people on Earth were gathering in the White House Situation Room. President Richard Hayes sat at the head of the table, his gray hair messy from being woken up in the middle of the night. Around him sat the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of NASA, and the directors of every major space agency in the world. Dr. Patricia Webb, the NASA administrator, spoke first. "We've confirmed the signal is artificial and from outside our solar system. The mathematical progressions are too complex to be natural phenomena. This is definitely intelligent life." General Carl Brooks, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. "What do we know about their situation?" "They're in trouble," Jake Morrison said. He had been flown to Washington on a military jet and still couldn't believe he was sitting in the White House. "The signal strength suggests their power is failing. Based on the transmission pattern, I estimate they have maybe a few days before they go completely dark." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Somewhere in the vastness of space, an entire species might be facing extinction. "Where are they?" asked Dr. Webb. "Approximately 42 light-years away," Jake replied. "In the direction of the constellation Lyra." Another silence. 42 light-years might as well have been on the other side of the universe. Humanity's fastest spacecraft would take over 100,000 years to travel that distance. "This is impossible," said Admiral Nancy Price from the Navy. "We don't have the technology to help them. We can barely get people to Mars reliably." President Hayes looked around the table at the faces of his advisors. He could see the same thought in all their eyes. They wanted to help, but how could they? Humanity was still trapped in its own solar system, taking baby steps toward the nearest stars. "Actually," said a quiet voice from the end of the table, "we might have a way." Everyone turned to look at Dr. Alex Turner, head of the Experimental Propulsion Division. He was a thin man with wild hair and thick glasses, the kind of scientist who spent more time in his laboratory than in the real world. "Explain," President Hayes said. Dr. Turner pulled out a tablet and brought up technical drawings that looked like something from a science fiction movie. "Project Phoenix. We've been working on it for 8 years in complete secrecy. It's a prototype spacecraft with an experimental faster-than-light drive." The room erupted in surprised voices. Even most of the people in this room had never heard of Project Phoenix. "Faster than light?" General Brooks said. "That's impossible. Einstein proved it." "Einstein was mostly right," Dr. Turner said with a small smile. "But he didn't know everything. We've found a way to bend space-time, creating a bubble around the ship that allows it to move faster than light without actually traveling faster than light. Think of it like surfing on a wave in space itself." Dr. Webb was staring at the technical drawings. "Does it work?" "We've tested it 3 times with unmanned probes," Dr. Turner said. "Twice it worked perfectly. Once the probe disappeared completely, and we never found out what happened to it. So there's a 33% chance of complete failure," Admiral Price said. "Actually, we think we fixed the problem that caused the 3rd test to fail. But yes, there are risks." President Hayes studied the drawings. The Phoenix looked unlike any spacecraft humanity had ever built. It was sleek and strange, with massive rings around the main body that supposedly bent space and time. "How long would it take to reach them?" he asked. "If the drive works as designed, about 3 weeks," Dr. Turner said. "Maybe a month." "And how many people can it carry?" "Doctor." Turner hesitated. "It was designed for unmanned exploration. The crew space is very small. Maybe 12 people, if we remove some of the scientific equipment." The room went quiet again as everyone considered the implications. 12 people in. An experimental spacecraft traveling faster than light to save aliens they had never met. It sounded insane. Who would crew such a mission? President Hayes asked Dot before anyone could answer. The door to the Situation Room opened. A tall man in a military uniform walked in and saluted. "Sorry I'm late, Mr. President. I came as soon as I heard." "Captain Danny Rodriguez," President Hayes said with relief. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing an impossible mission." Danny Rodriguez was one of humanity's most experienced space pilots. He had flown 6 missions to Mars and had spent more time in deep space than almost anyone alive. He was also known for volunteering for the most dangerous assignments. Dr. Turner quickly explained the situation and the Phoenix project. As he talked, Danny's expression grew more serious. When Dr. Turner finished, Danny was quiet for a long moment. "So let me understand this," Danny said finally. "We received a distress call from aliens 42 light years away. We have an untested experimental ship that might be able to reach them in time, and you need someone crazy enough to fly it." "That's about right," President Hayes said. Danny smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Mr. President, I've spent my whole career wondering what's out there among the stars. Now I know there are people out there who need our help. Count me in." Over the next hour, they discussed the details. The Phoenix would need to be modified quickly to carry a rescue crew. They would need supplies, medical equipment, and some way to communicate with the aliens when they arrived. "There's one more thing, Doctor," Turner said quietly. "The Phoenix was designed for short-range exploration. It doesn't have enough fuel for a round trip to the alien location. Once we launch, the crew might not be able to come home." The room fell silent once more. "President." Hayes looked around the table at his advisors, then at Captain Rodriguez. "Danny," he said, "you understand what Dr. Turner just said?" "Yes, sir," Danny replied. "It's a one-way ticket. But those aliens sent out a call for help, and someone answered. If we don't try to save them, we'll spend the rest of our lives wondering what we could have done differently." President Hayes stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over Washington. Somewhere beyond that sunrise, beyond the Earth's atmosphere, beyond the solar system itself, people were dying in the cold darkness of space. "We're going to try," he said finally. "God help us all, but we're going to try." The Phoenix launched from the International Space Station on a Tuesday morning. Captain Danny Rodriguez sat in the pilot's seat, watching Earth grow smaller on his screen. Behind him, his crew of 11 prepared for the longest journey any human had ever attempted. Maria Santos, the chief engineer, checked the experimental drive systems one more time. She was a small woman with steady hands and a mind that understood machines better than most people understood other humans. If the Phoenix broke down in the middle of space, she would be the one to fix it. Dr. Kevin Wright, the medical officer, organized his supplies in the tiny medical bay. He had brought everything he could think of, but he had no idea what alien biology would be like. Would human medicine work on them? Would they even be able to breathe the same air? Amy Chun, the communications officer, listened to the alien signal on her headphones. It was much weaker now, barely audible above the background noise of space. She had been working day and night to decode more of their language, trying to establish real communication before it was too late. "Phoenix Control, this is Houston," came the voice through the radio. "You are cleared for FTL jump. Good luck and Godspeed." Danny looked at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. Each of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see home again. "Are we ready?" he asked. "As ready as we'll ever be," Maria said from the engine room. Danny activated the experimental drive. The universe around them twisted and bent in ways that hurt to look at. Space itself seemed to fold like paper, and suddenly they were moving. Faster than light, surfing on a wave of bent space-time. The first week of the journey was strange. The Phoenix moved through a universe that looked wrong, where stars streaked past like lines of light, and space itself seemed to ripple like water. The crew tried to stay busy, checking systems and running tests, but there was an odd feeling to everything, like they were dreaming while awake. Amy spent most of her time trying to talk to the aliens. She had figured out some basic words in their language and was sending simple messages back toward their location. "We are coming," she transmitted over and over. "Hold on, help is coming." On the 10th day, she got an answer. The alien voice was weak and full of static, but Amy could understand some of the words. They were surprised, almost shocked, that someone had heard their call for help. They couldn't believe that anyone would travel so far to save strangers. "My name is Amy," she said slowly into the microphone, using the alien words she had learned. "We are humans. We heard your call. We are coming to help." The response came back after several minutes. "I am Zexani. We are Zephyrians. We thought we were alone. We thought no one would hear us." Amy felt tears in her eyes. These aliens had been crying out in the darkness, believing they would die alone and forgotten. Now they knew that someone had heard them. Someone was coming. How? "Many of you are there?" Amy asked. "Less than 5,000, came the reply. "We are dying. Our ships are broken. Our power is almost gone." Amy looked around the small crew compartment of the Phoenix. 12 humans and a ship designed for short exploration missions. How could they possibly save 5,000 aliens? She shared the conversation with Captain Rodriguez. He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the strange view of faster-than-light space. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "We didn't come this far to give up now." On the 15th day, they detected the alien ships on their sensors. Even from a distance, it was clear that the Zephyrians were in terrible trouble. Their ships were damaged, drifting without power, barely held together by emergency systems. "My God," whispered Dr. Wright, looking at the sensor readings. "How are they still alive?" The Phoenix dropped out of faster-than-light speed near the alien fleet. The 3 Zephyrian ships were smaller than Danny had expected, but they were beautiful in their own way, with curved hulls and graceful lines. Now those beautiful ships were scarred by battle damage, their hulls cracked and leaking air into space. Amy established communication with the lead ship. Commander Veltar, the alien leader, couldn't hide his amazement at seeing the Phoenix. "You are real," he said, his voice full of wonder. "You actually came." "We're real," Amy replied. "We're here to help. What do you need?" "Everything," Veltar said simply. "Food, water, air, power. But most of all, we need to get away from here. The Devourers are coming." Danny had heard about the Devourers from the alien transmissions, but he didn't understand what they were until Dr. Wright picked them up on the long-range sensors. "Captain," Dr. Wright said, his voice tight with fear, "you need to see this." The objects approaching from deep space were huge, each one the size of a small moon. They were geometric shapes, perfect triangles and squares and circles, but there was something wrong about them. They seemed to eat light itself, creating dark spots in space wherever they moved. "What are those things?" Maria asked. "The Devourers." Veltar's voice came through the communicator. "Ancient machines. They consume everything in their path. They have been hunting us for years." Danny looked at the sensor readings. The Devourers were still far away, but they were moving fast. At their current speed, they would reach the refugee fleet in less than 2 days. "We need to evacuate your people now," Danny told Veltar. "Get everyone onto the Phoenix." "Impossible," Veltar replied. "Your ship is too small. We are thousands. You are 12. Danny walked through the Phoenix, looking at every compartment, every storage space, every corner where they might fit people. Maria was right behind him, taking measurements and making calculations. "We can do it," she said finally. "But we'll have to strip out everything non-essential. The scientific equipment, most of the supplies, even some of the life support systems. It will be tight, and the journey home will be dangerous." "What about the Devourers?" Amy asked. "How do we get away from them?" Dr. Wright was still studying. "The sensor readings. They're fast, but they're big. Maybe we can outrun them." "No," said a new voice. It was Colvin, the young Zephyrian scientist, speaking through the communicator. "They are faster than anything we have ever built. Running will not work." The crew of the Phoenix looked at each other. They had come so far, traveled faster than light across the galaxy, found the aliens they had come to save. But now they faced an enemy that had been hunting the Zephyrians for years, destroying everything in its path. There has to be a way, Danny said. We didn't come here to watch everyone die. Over the next few hours, they worked frantically to modify the Phoenix. They removed seats, storage containers, scientific equipment, anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. They created sleeping spaces in the cargo holds and engineering compartments. It would be cramped and uncomfortable, but they could fit most of the Zephyrian refugees. Meanwhile, the Devourers continued their approach. The alien machines were even stranger up close, their surfaces covered in patterns that hurt to look at. They moved through space like living things, but there was something cold and mechanical about them. We're running out of time, Amy reported. The Devourers will be here in 18 hours. Danny made the decision. We start the evacuation now. Get as many Zephyrians as we can onto the Phoenix. We'll figure out the rest later. The evacuation began immediately. The Zephyrians were weak from months of poor air and little food, but they moved quickly. They knew this was their only chance for survival. As the first aliens came aboard the Phoenix, Dr. Wright got his first close look at them. They were taller than humans, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness of their dying race. But there was hope there too, hope that had been missing for so long. Thank you, each Zephyrian said as they came aboard. Thank you for coming for us. But even as the evacuation continued, the Devourers grew closer. Soon they would arrive, and then everyone, human and alien alike, would face the same fate that had befallen the Zephyrian civilization. Danny stared out at the approaching darkness and wondered if they had come all this way just to die together. The Phoenix was packed with over 3,000 Zephyrian refugees when the Devourers arrived. The massive machine entities emerged from deep space like nightmares made real, their geometric forms blocking out the stars. Each one was the size of a city, moving with purpose that spoke of ancient intelligence and endless hunger. Captain Danny Rodriguez stood on the bridge, watching the alien machines approach. Behind him, the Phoenix groaned under the weight of far more people than it was designed to carry. The air was thick and stale, recycled too many times through systems pushed beyond their limits. They're scanning us, Amy Chun reported from her communication station. I'm getting some kind of signal from the lead Devourer. What kind of signal? Danny asked. It's not language, Amy said, her face pale. It's more like ... inventory. They're cataloging us, measuring how much matter we represent. Commander Veltar moved carefully through the crowded bridge. The Zephyrian leader looked exhausted, but his large eyes burned with determination. Captain Rodriguez, you must leave now. Take your ship and go. Do not let our fate become yours. Danny shook his head. We're not leaving anyone behind. There are still 2,000 of your people on those ships. They are already dead, Veltar said quietly. The Devourers will consume everything here. There is no escape. Maria Santos looked up from her engineering console. The FTL drive is damaged from the overload. We can't jump to light speed with this much weight anyway. We're trapped here with everyone else. Dr. Kevin Wright was monitoring the life support systems. We have maybe 6 hours of air left with this many people aboard. After that, we'll start losing consciousness from carbon dioxide poisoning. The situation was hopeless. The Devourers were too fast to outrun, too powerful to fight. The Phoenix was overloaded and breaking down. In a few hours, everyone would be dead. But Danny had not traveled 42 light years to give up now. Maria? He said, what would happen if we overloaded the FTL drive completely? Instead of using it to travel, what if we used it to create a massive space distortion right here? Maria stared at him. You're talking about tearing a hole in space-time itself. The energy release would be enormous. Big enough to destroy the Devourers? Big enough to destroy everything within 1,000,000 kilometers, Maria said. Including us. The bridge went quiet. Outside, the Devourers continued their approach, moving with the patience of machines that had been consuming civilizations for millions of years. Colvin, the young Zephyrian scientist, spoke up from where? He sat near the communications console. Wait, there might be another way. Everyone turned to look at him. My people have been running from the Devourers for years, he said. We learned some things about them. They exist partially in normal space and partially in something else. A dimension where they store the matter they consume. What does that mean? Danny asked. If you create a space distortion at the right frequency, you might be able to trap them in that other dimension. Cut them off from normal space permanently. Amy was already working at her console, running calculations. The power requirements are still enormous. We'd have to overload every system on the Phoenix. The ship wouldn't survive. But we might, Dr. Wright said slowly. If we could get everyone into the escape pods and the Zephyrian ships before the distortion activates. Danny looked around the bridge at his crew and the alien refugees. It's a long shot. We're talking about experimental science with technology we barely understand. Captain, said a voice from the communication system. It was Lieutenant Jake Morrison, calling from Earth. The transmission was delayed by the vast distance, but his voice was clear. We've been monitoring your situation. The whole world is watching. Whatever you decide to do, we're behind you. Danny smiled despite everything. Even here, at the edge of known space, facing impossible odds, Earth hadn't forgotten them. All right, he said. We try it. Maria, start the overload sequence. Amy, coordinate with the Zephyrian ships. Everyone who can fit needs to get off the Phoenix in the next hour. The evacuation was chaos. Thousands of aliens moved through the cramped corridors of the Phoenix, heading for the docking ports where the damaged Zephyrian ships waited. Human crews stayed at their posts, monitoring the systems and preparing for the desperate gamble. Commander Veltar refused to leave the bridge. You are sacrificing your ship and possibly your lives for people you barely know, he said to Danny. Why? Danny thought about it as he watched his crew work. Because it's the right thing to do. Because when someone calls for help, you answer. Because that's what makes us human. The Devourers were close now, their massive forms filling the view screen. The lead machine entity was beginning to extend tendrils of dark energy toward the Phoenix, preparing to begin consumption. Overload at 90%, Maria reported. All refugees are off the ship, except for the command crew. Amy, are you getting any response from the Zephyrian ships? Danny asked. Their engines are online, Amy said. Barely. They can move, but not fast. It'll have to be enough. Maria, take us to 100%. The Phoenix began to shake as the FTL drive overloaded. Energy patterns that were never meant to exist in normal space began to form around the ship. The Devourers seemed to notice the distortion, their movement becoming more urgent. Now! Danny shouted. Maria activated the final sequence. The space around the Phoenix exploded into impossible geometries. Reality twisted and folded, creating a massive distortion that reached out like a spider's web to encompass the Devourer fleet. For a moment, the ancient machines fought against the distortion. Their forms flickered between dimensions, trying to escape the trap. But the power of the overloaded drive was too much. One by one, the Devourers were pulled into the other dimension, their forms disappearing from normal space. The last thing Danny saw before the Phoenix's systems failed was the Devourer fleet vanishing into the dimensional rift, trapped forever in the space between spaces. When the crew woke up, they were aboard one of the Zephyrian ships. The Phoenix was gone, completely destroyed by the energy release. But they were alive, and so were the refugees. The devourers? Danny asked weakly. Gone, Veltar said, his voice filled with wonder. After all these years of running, they are finally gone. The journey back to Earth took 30 years. The damaged Zephyrian ships could only travel at a fraction of light speed, making the trip home a generation-long voyage. But it was a journey, filled with hope instead of despair. During those 30 years, humans and Zephyrians learned to work together. The aliens shared their knowledge of energy manipulation and biotechnology. The humans taught them about determination and never giving up even when things seemed impossible. Children were born during the voyage, both human and Zephyrian. They grew up together, learning each other's languages, playing games that combined both cultures. By the time they reached Earth, they were not two separate species, but one people united by shared experience. When the fleet finally arrived at Earth, now an old man, Danny stood on the bridge of the lead ship and looked at his home planet. It was still blue and beautiful, still the same world he had left so long ago. Commander Veltar, also aged by the long journey, stood beside him. Your people answered our call for help, he said, but you gave us something more than rescue. You gave us hope. The ships were met by a celebration that lasted for weeks. The children born during the voyage marveled at their parents' home worlds. Earth had prepared for their arrival, building new cities and research centers where both species could live and work together. At the ceremony welcoming the refugees, Veltar spoke to the assembled crowd. We sent a message into the void, expecting to die alone, he said. Instead, we learned that somewhere in the universe, there are people who will travel across the galaxy to help strangers. You saved our lives, but more than that, you saved our faith in the goodness of intelligent life. The partnership between humans and Zephyrians led to new technologies, new ships, and new possibilities. Together, they began to explore the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as rescuers. They established the Galactic Rescue Service, dedicated to ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction alone. Years later, when other civilizations sent distress calls into the void, they were answered. The combined fleets of Earth and the Zephyrian colonies traveled to distant stars, carrying the message that had started it all. When someone calls for help, someone will answer. And in the museums of both Earth and New Zephyria, there stood a memorial to the Phoenix and its crew. The inscription was simple. They heard the call. They answered. They showed us what it means to be human.